You fill out your 2015 federal tax return, file it by the April 15th deadline, and breathe a sigh of relief. A few weeks later, though, you get a letter from the IRS saying you've already filed your tax return, that a refund was issued to you weeks ago, and your IRS account has been frozen. You've been the victim of tax return identity theft, a scam that's increased by 650% since 2008. What do you do if this happens to you? Tax expert Dan Pilla, author of How to Win Your Tax Audit, says there are steps you can take to fight back, but you have to act fast.
Well, tax expert Dan Pilla is with us right now. Dan, we're talking about this identity theft thing. How bad is it? How many tax returns are stolen, the identity?
Well, in terms of the number, Pat, it's hard to say, but let me put it to you this way. The Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration has called this the crime of the century.
Really?
There are so many false returns being filed with the IRS every year, and the IRS is issuing literally tens of billions of dollars worth of bogus refunds that are going to these thieves, and they don't know how many. It's so broad, they don't know exactly the number of returns that are being stolen.
They just, a phony return comes in showing all the right numbers, says, you owe me $10,000 return. So they just cut a check and send it to them.
They cut a check and send it to them. And a lot of these, Pat, are going to their electronic deposits, electronic refunds, that are going into the same bank account. One of the things that the Treasury Inspector General reported was that there was a couple $100,000 worth of refunds, a couple $1,000s at a time. So we're talking about numerous refunds all going to one bank account. So, I mean, this is a sophisticated scam that these people are running for sure.
Well, why can't the federal government, can't they do anything right?
Well, can't they do anything right? Well, you're asking the wrong guy that question, because I don't think they can do anything right, particularly when it comes to enforcing, protecting themselves. Because not only is it a problem, Pat, with identity thieves, stealing identities, Social Security numbers, and so forth in the general marketplace, but they've even managed to hack the IRS's computers. Now, we learned that a year ago that the computers were hacked, but we've only recently learned the scope of that problem. And now the Treasury Inspector General has told us that almost 1 million taxpayers' identities have been stolen from the IRS's computers.
You don't mean it.
Yeah,
well, you're
absolutely.
talking about billions of dollars.
Yeah, no question about it. And of course, the tax aspects of it are just the beginning. If your identity is stolen, these thieves could get access to your bank account, your debit cards, your credit cards. Who knows where that could end. So
you put some pretty intimate financial details about yourself on your tax, and it's supposed to be strictly confidential. So you're saying they hacked in and they have the full story of each taxpayer?
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah,
That's shocking.
According to the Treasury Inspector General, there have been about 750,000 taxpayers whose information was actually heisted from the IRS's computers, and another couple 100,000 that were tampered with. And they say they didn't get all that information. But we're talking about upwards of 1 million taxpayers who were affected by this.
Whew. Multiplied times, I can't figure the math.
It's hard to wrap your head around this thing, because once they get the information from the IRS, now they can go just about anywhere with it to steal, as I said, bank accounts, credit cards, debit cards, these kinds of things. And if you're dealing with a debit card situation, for example, somebody gets your debit card number, Pat, they can clean out your bank account.
Sure.
They can just clean it right out. Not so much with credit cards. Of course, they can run up a credit card bill, but at least in that situation, you've got the right to fight back, and you still have your money.
How does somebody defend himself? How can you go out and clarify these matters? It'd take years, doesn't it?
Well, it could take years, but let me give you a couple simple steps here.
Okay.
First of all, if you believe you're a victim of identity theft, whether it's general market ID theft or your information was stolen from the IRS, all right? In either situation, you got to file with the IRS immediately what the IRS calls an identity theft affidavit. And that's IRS form 14039. I talk about it in my book, How to Win Your Tax Audit. 14039 is the form. You file that form, and when you file that form, the IRS is going to give you a new taxpayer identification number, all right? It's a new one, so you won't use your Social Security number with the IRS anymore. Now you'll file with a new number. That's the first thing to do, is put the IRS on notice that there's a problem out there, and now you've got a new ID number, so at least that puts up a wall of security there. The next thing you got to do is change your bank accounts. Not necessarily your bank, but your bank accounts. Open new accounts so you're dealing with new account numbers. It's especially important to do that if you've got a debit card attached to that particular bank account, because with a debit card they can clean it right out.
Yeah.
And then I would change your credit card numbers as well. Those three things do immediately, and that's going to minimize the risk, or minimize the exposure then to to the thieves.
Dan's book is one of the best known about how to win your tax audit. That's only one of the many things you talk about here.
Yeah, that's right. There are all kinds of things we talk about in this book. I take you step by step. Put it this way, Pat, this is the most thorough discussion on the tax audit procedures that's ever been written for the public. I show you step by step exactly how to deal with any tax audit situation so that you come out of it with your money in your pocket.
Does the IRS love you or hate you?
Well, I don't get Christmas cards from them, Pat. I'll put it to you that way.
Okay. I mean, you're showing their dirty secrets to the whole public.
Yeah. In fact, one of the chapters in the book is 13 IRS bluffs and intimidations and how to counter them. So I do tear down the system for you to show you exactly what the IRS's weaknesses are in the audit process. You know, for example, the IRS uses tactics of bluff and intimidation, misinformation and disinformation, and in many cases, they just outright lie to people concerning what their rights are and what the agency's limitations are. And I expose all that in the book.
Should somebody have a lawyer when they go talk to these people?
Well, it depends on the situation. If the IRS starts using the F word in the audit process, and by that I mean fraud, if that fraud word comes up, then you absolutely better get yourself counsel right away, because fraud implications are very serious, both from a civil and a criminal standpoint. Yeah. If it's a routine garden variety audit and the IRS just simply wants you to verify certain items on your tax return, which most of the audits are, that's a simple process, Pat, if you understand what the procedure is. And what I teach you in the book is exactly what your responsibility is as a taxpayer. See, and this is important because people don't know what they're supposed to do in the audit. And the key thing with respect to that is the burden of proof. And see, the burden of proof is on the taxpayer. And this is different from every other area of law in the United States where the burden of proof is on the government, right? In a tax audit situation, the IRS never has to prove, I shouldn't say never, they rarely have to prove that you did it wrong. You have to prove you did it right. And so what the book does is it takes you step by step through the process of how to do exactly that when it comes to your income and your deductions.
One last thing, we've seen the scandal. Lois Lerner took the fifth. She did all kinds of bad things and has gotten away scot-free. It looks like the head of the IRS is kind of out to lunch. What do we do?
It's interesting that you talk about Lois Lerner taking the Fifth Amendment on the tax return. For years, tax protesters were filing tax returns and they'd claim the Fifth Amendment on the tax return. Yeah. And they would argue that the Fifth Amendment prevented them from having to give any information to the government. And if it applies in a court case, it certainly must apply on a tax return. Well, guess what? Those people were prosecuted, Pat, for failure to file tax returns. They were prosecuted. And yet Lois Lerner walks away.
It's a double standard. Well, Dan has written a book here, ladies and gentlemen. It's as good as there is in the whole nation. And if you're getting ready to file your taxes, it wouldn't hurt to get this book. It's called How to Win. How do they get it? Where
the best way to get it is right from cbnnews.com.
Okay.
cbnnews.com, your website.
All right.
There's links on your website to get the book, and I think your organization, I know your organization has got a package available for folks, so they go right to your website, cbnnews.com, and they can get it there.
How to Win Your Tax Audit, Dan Pilla.